There is a city that no map remembers, a city that rises only when the moon is full and drowns before morning. It has no name in modern tongues, no nation claims it, and no one who's ever entered it has returned the same. Some say it was built by starlight, others say it was a punishment floating between worlds. But all agree on one thing: if you hear the city whisper your name, it's already too late. What you're about to hear is not just a story. It's a memory the sea tried to bury and the moon refuses to forget. Welcome to the tale of the city that sinks every full moon, and the architect who was never meant to leave. They said the ocean took it, but the tides weren't due. The moon wasn't full yet. It was a whisper first, as most legends are. A strange note in a weathered explorer's blog, a satellite glitch on an open source map, a rumor passed around a dockside bar where the drinks were stronger than the truth. But Eli didn't chase legends for truth. He chased the things that made the heart race, the pulse of the past that still throbbed beneath layers of sand, stone, and sea. Eli was an urban explorer, though urban barely fit anymore. Cities were too new, too loud. He craved ruins, the kind no one remembered, the kind that shouldn't be there. Which is why he found himself driving down the sun-bleached coast of a forgotten peninsula in the far south, where no tours stopped, no locals spoke of history, and the land itself seemed to have turned its back on time. There, tucked behind a jagged cliffside, he discovered a half-submerged stone archway, not marked on any map, not listed in any archaeological record. Not recent, either. The stones were smooth, carved by hand long before concrete existed. Symbols wrapped around the entrance like ivy, spirals, crescent moons, inverted towers. He took pictures, but they came out blurred. Inside, beneath the arch, the earth descended in steps, half eaten by the sea, the rest swallowed by time. Eli, wading through waist-deep brine, found what he didn't know he was looking for. A leather-bound journal, encased in glass, chained to the floor by iron rusted over so many times it had turned black. He shattered the case, pulled the book free. Its pages bled salt. Ink ran like veins. But one line at the very end, etched with pressure more than ink, stood untouched by time or tide. The city will rise tonight. That night, the moon was 1 day shy of full. He didn't sleep. The next day, he went into the nearest village. It barely qualified as a settlement. A crooked church, a few fishermen, dogs that barked at nothing. Eli showed them the journal. They pretended not to see. He asked about Amaranta. They looked away. One woman, wrinkled by more years than Eli could count, muttered without meeting his eyes, "That name drowned before you were born." She wouldn't say more. The others said nothing at all. But Eli was not the kind to let silence win. He found a rusted library 2 towns over. Inside, behind stacks of mold-bitten documents, he found proof, or what passed for it in legends. Maps from the 1700s. A sailor's diary. One torn chart with a red circle far off the modern coastline. Scribbled beside it, barely legible. Amaranta, drowned by curse, risen by blood. He stared at it for hours. Then cross-referenced old satellite images. One from 15 years ago showed nothing, but one taken during a full moon, 5 years back, showed a strange circular anomaly. Not land, not wave, something else. A perfect circle. A city grid. Submerged. Waiting. By sunset, Eli was back at the ruin, now equipped with his drone and infrared sensors. The archway pulsed with heat signatures that made no logical sense. The air pressure dropped with every passing hour, like the sky itself held its breath. The wind died. The tide paused. Then reversed. It didn't retreat slowly as tide should. It pulled back like something frightened, sucked away from the shore as if recoiling from what was about to arrive. The moon rose. Not full yet, but it didn't need to be. The sea cracked open like glass. At first, it was only a shimmer, a disturbance on the horizon. Then, stone broke the surface. A spire, tall and narrow, shaped like a needle wrapped in vines. Glowing, not with light, but with memory. Eli watched through his lens, hands trembling. Another structure breached the water. Then another. Not random. Not ruins. A city. Planned. built with purpose. A metropolis that belonged to no time. Towers, arches, roads beneath the ocean skin, and lights. The city lit from within, but not with electricity, with something older, something that remembered. He filmed until the drone battery died. Then, reluctantly, he returned to the car, eyes never leaving the sea. It stood, impossibly, before him, a city that was not there yesterday and would not be there tomorrow. That night he reviewed the footage, frame by frame, zoomed in, people, no statues, dozens of them, lining the streets, each misstep, each with an expression of terror, arms raised, mouths wide. Not carved, not designed, preserved, frozen. One in particular made him pause. She looked young, 20 maybe, dressed in robes that shimmered despite the dark. One hand raised as if waving for help, the other clutching a small book. A journal, the same design as the one he'd found. Eli barely slept. His dreams were strange. He wandered streets of salt and stone, saw children playing under crescent moons, and heard bells that rang without sound. When he woke, the taste of brine was still on his lips. The next day, the city was gone. The coastline was normal. No strange tides. No glowing towers. But Eli had proof now. Footage, coordinates, artifacts, and the journal. His phone had dozens of unread messages from his online followers. They'd seen the teaser clips he uploaded during the night. Thousands of views. Comments filled with curiosity and disbelief. But one stood out. A message from a username he didn't recognize. You've seen what wasn't meant to be seen. The next full moon won't let you leave. He ignored it, mostly, but by evening his phone glitched. Maps wouldn't load. His footage corrupted. And the journal? It no longer had that last line. The ink had bled entirely now. All except the title on the first page. Amaranta, the city that dies for the moon. That evening he drove back. This time, not to film. To find out what was calling him. The air felt heavier. The closer he got, the less he remembered why he'd come. His GPS failed. Even the coastline looked different, as if the cliffs had moved. But he knew he was close. When he reached the same spot again, something had changed. The archway had grown. He stepped through it, flashlight flickering. Salt coated everything. The steps beneath him pulsed. No longer stone. Flesh? It was in his mind. The symbols on the walls shimmered, rearranged themselves as he passed. One symbol, the spiral, followed him, moved with him. At the bottom of the steps, the water was gone, replaced by mist. And in that mist, a voice. Not heard, felt. You followed the moon. He didn't answer, didn't need to. The mist parted, and there it was again. The spire, lit from within, but now much closer, within walking distance. He should have turned back, but some part of him, old, buried, unfamiliar, urged him forward. His steps matched rhythms he didn't know he remembered. The stones beneath his feet hummed. The stars above him spun too fast. When he reached the shore, the tide recoiled again. Faster this time, as if something beneath the sea hungered for air. He watched, heart pounding, as the city rose once more. Faster, like it knew he was waiting. The first tower broke the water's skin like a blade. Then another. Then a dozen. Windows blinked like eyes. Arches flexed. Statues revealed themselves from the deep. Their eyes closed this time. But not peaceful. Resigned. Eli dropped to his knees as the spire lit again. Not gold. Not silver. As if pulsing with a heartbeat. His camera, still rolling, picked up something new. A figure. At the city's edge. Waiting. Holding a lantern. And watching him. Eli blinked. And it was gone. But the tide had not returned. The city stood. For longer than the night allowed. He stared until the stars dimmed, until the moon faded into dawn. Only then did the ocean creep forward again, as if ashamed of what it revealed. The city sank. Slowly. Not like a flood. Like a burial. And as the last spire slipped beneath the water's skin, Eli whispered the name aloud for the first time. Amaranta. The waves responded. They whispered back. And somewhere deep beneath them, a bell rang. Eli didn't speak for days after the first sighting. Not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't find the words. How do you describe something that doesn't belong to this world? How do you explain to people that a city drowned by time is still breathing, rising under the moonlight like it remembers being alive? He tried. He uploaded the footage. Thousands watched. Some believed. Most didn't. But one person did. A woman named Mara. She was a scientist, or so her email said. Not a paranormal enthusiast, not a conspiracy chaser, but a cognitive archaeologist. A rare kind of academic who studied memory the way others studied ruins. She didn't ask for proof. She simply wrote, "If it remembers, I want to see it." 3 nights later, she stood beside Eli, her dark hair tied tight, her boots sinking slightly into the damp coastal sand. The moon was rising again, and this time it would be full. She brought gear, sensors, an AI-integrated drone, scanners that read temperature variances in stone, and a strange device she called a memory imager. Eli didn't ask how it worked. He only cared that she believed. As the silver circle climbed into the sky, the wind died once more. The sea, as before, began to retreat, not with the grace of tide, but with a fear that pulsed through the waves themselves. The air grew heavy, the shoreline trembled, and Amaranta rose again. They watched, side by side, as the spires returned like memories surfacing after trauma. One by one, towers lifted their heads, glowing softly. The glow wasn't light in the way we know it, not electric, not even luminescent. It was like watching something remember its shape. Stone formed with intention, not random, not broken. The city was never in ruins. It was merely asleep. Mara whispered, "It's not just rising. It's reconstructing." Eli nodded. "And it doesn't like being seen." They stepped forward together. The mist around the city parted for them, as though it remembered them too. Eli felt it again, the strange rhythm beneath his feet, the echo of forgotten footsteps that felt like his own. But it was different now. The air no longer smelled like salt. It smelled like rust and blood. Buildings stood untouched by water damage. Thomas. No algae. No decay. As if the sea hadn't touched them even after centuries of submersion. Their forms were impossible, walls too smooth, angles too precise. Some structures bent in ways that should have collapsed them. Eli recognized styles, columns that felt Babylonian, mosaics in a pattern that echoed Greek geometry, and yet none of it matched. There were carvings of constellations that had never existed. Doorways too narrow for humans, hallways that curved in perfect spirals. The city felt alien, yet intimately human. Ancient, yet impossibly advanced. It's architecture that shouldn't exist, Mara whispered, scanning the buildings. A blend of civilizations that never coexisted. This isn't a city. It's a thought. A memory rendered in stone. They continued deeper. Statues lined the paths. At first, Eli thought they were decorative. But the expressions, he had seen them before. The same twisted agony, arms frozen mid-motion, eyes wide in horror. One was kneeling, hands pressed against its ears. Its face cracked in a silent scream. Another stood with its back arched, clutching its chest, as if dying of something unseen. Mara touched one gently. Her scanner beeped. "No stone composite," she murmured. "This isn't carved." Eli swallowed hard. "Then what is it?" The scanner flickered. "Organic traces," she whispered. "They aren't statues," Eli said. "They're people." Panic itched at the back of his throat, but the city wouldn't let him run. He felt watched, by the windows, by the arches, by the air itself. Every building had a presence. Every doorway looked like an eye that had just blinked. Mara knelt beside one of the frozen figures, a woman mid-step, hand outstretched as if reaching for help. Her fingers were curled in agony. Mara's voice was tight. She was trying to leave. The memory imager activated. A burst of static. And then a sound. A whisper. "Please. I didn't know." Thunthlice. Eli staggered back. "What was that?" Mara turned pale. "Residual memory. It's not supposed to work on stone. But this place isn't stone, Eli said. It's a graveyard that breathes. They walked faster now, toward what looked like a central square. It was domed, with a fountain that bubbled not with water, but with something viscous and silver. Like liquid mirror. Symbols rotated slowly around its surface, spirals, moons, hands raised in surrender. All around them, the buildings throbbed with a silent rhythm, as if beating with one vast shared heart. Eli looked up. In the sky, the moon had begun to glow brighter. Not whiter, brighter, like it was watching, like it was proud. And in that moment, the city changed. The statues moved, just slightly. A hand twitched. A foot slid. Eyes opened. Not all of them, just one. The kneeling one. She blinked, looked directly at Mara, and opened her mouth. No sound came, but the meaning did. You're not supposed to be here. Then her body collapsed into dust. The city shifted. A tremor beneath their feet. Not an earthquake. A shudder. A rejection. As if the city realized it had been seen, truly seen, and recoiled in shame or anger. Mara pulled Eli back. We need to leave. But Eli stared at the square. At the fountain. Look, he said. The silver liquid in the fountain had changed. No longer reflective. It now showed images, flickering, glitching scenes like memories playing through water. A council chamber. People wearing moon-shaped masks. An execution. A child offered at the edge of a cliff beneath a bleeding moon. And then, a man who looked exactly like Eli, only older, wearing robes, screaming as he was lowered into the same fountain, which swallowed him whole. Eli turned away. I've seen enough. They ran. The drone followed them, silently, until it didn't. They noticed it when it froze midair, then spun in place, then dropped. It landed with a thud, but didn't break. Its screen glowed, flickered, then it spoke, not in a voice, not even as sound, but as a feeling, a transmission not meant for ears, but for memory. You're not supposed to see us. Mara stumbled back. It's in the tech. It's inside the circuits. The drone began to melt, literally. Plastic turned to ash. Metal warped. Eli grabbed Mara's hand. We leave. Now. They reached the shoreline just as the city began to descend. Not like a structure, but like an illusion fading. The spires fell back into the sea. The towers collapsed without sound. The streets folded into mist. The statues did not move again, but one stood at the water's edge watching them. Eli couldn't look away. It was the same face again. His own. But this time it smiled. They didn't speak on the drive back. Not until they reached the motel, hours later, soaked in sweat, silence, and salt. Mara plugged in the backup drone footage. It was corrupted, except one still frame. A single image, frozen and perfect. The council chamber, 12 masked figures around a crescent table. A 13th chair, empty. And etched on the seat, he must return. Mara stood slowly. We found a city that never died, she said. Only waits. Eli nodded. And it remembers who we are. But the strangest thing of all wasn't the drone, or the statues, or the voices in stone. It was what Mara found later that night. A spiral symbol, small, perfect, ancient, etched into the skin behind her left ear. She didn't know how long it had been there, but she knew it hadn't been there before Amaranta. And when she touched it, she didn't feel her own heartbeat. She felt the city's. There are places where time flows like a river. Then there are places where time forgets how to flow at all. Amaranta was not a city lost to time. It was a city outside of it. Eli didn't know this when he returned. He thought he'd seen the worst of it. The spires rising, the statues that breathed, the whispers in circuits that didn't belong to any human tongue. But time was a different kind of curse. It began the moment he and Mara stepped through the city gates again. This time, they came prepared, or so they believed. Watches synchronized, timers running, multiple drones, analog and digital, all recording. They passed under an archway deeper into Amaranta's heart, and every clock stopped. Not just stopped, refused to move. Analog hands jammed. Digital screens blanked out. Even the sun overhead dimmed slightly, like a memory fading. Their footsteps echoed strangely. Not delayed, not distorted, just thrown. Eli turned and saw his own shadow facing away from him, cast by a light that didn't exist. He said Mara's name. No response. He looked back. She was gone. At first, he thought she'd walked ahead. But when he retraced his steps, she wasn't behind him either. Just the arch. The moment he passed through it, she'd vanished. He called out. No answer. But then a flicker. A sound. Her voice, distant and muffled, echoed through the stone. I'm here. Eli, I think I'm still here. And then silence. He paced in circles, shouted, waved the drone light in all directions. Minutes passed. Or hours. It was impossible to tell. His phone showed the same time as when they'd entered. His body didn't feel tired, but his thoughts were unraveling. Then, after what felt like moments, or maybe centuries, Mara reappeared. She stepped calmly out from the arch, blinking at the sun as if no time had passed. Her clothes were dry. Her hands were clean, except for her fingernails. Beneath them was fresh blood. Eli stared. Where were you? She tilted her head. I walked through. It was only seconds. You've been gone 6 hours, he said. She didn't answer right away, because she didn't believe him, until she checked the footage. All 6 hours of it. Mara watching herself vanish, and Eli pacing, waiting, screaming, and a frame, just one, where a masked figure stood behind her in the distance, then vanished. She said nothing for a long time, then whispered, We're not in our time. We're in the cities. They continued. The streets began to shift, not visibly, but subtly. A building that had been on their left now appeared on the right. An alley turned into a corridor, a wall where there was once a staircase. The city was folding in on itself, or folding them into it. Eli noticed first. The same house appeared 3 times in different places. Same cracked window, same inscription above the door, same faint shadow inside, watching. Mara began to sweat. Not from heat, from memory. I've seen this before, she said. You couldn't have. No, not here. In dreams. I used to draw this place as a child. They turned a corner, and there it was. A mural, so massive it covered the entire side of a building. Ancient, cracked, but eerily preserved. It showed people in robes kneeling under a blood-red moon. Above them, a circle of figures wearing masks shaped like the moon's phases, crescent, half, gibbous, full, new. At the center, a child being offered to a fountain, the same silver fountain they'd seen days ago. But behind the council stood towers, towers made of light. Shimmering, unreal. Eli traced one of the masks. They built this city with more than stone. Mara nodded. They built it with memory. And memory, they soon realized, was leaking. Eli began to remember things that weren't his. He spoke languages he never learned. Names returned to him, Virion, Voth, Merrily. He felt them like scars. He saw flashes of a life lived in Amaranta centuries ago. He wore robes, taught children, argued with masked figures, stood at the edge of the silver fountain, shouting warnings that no one heard. Mara watched him slip. You're remembering Amaranta, she said. No, Eli whispered. Amaranta is remembering me. She didn't respond, because her own hands had started to shake. She turned a corner and stopped cold. Before her stood a house, one she had seen before. Not here, in her childhood drawings. The door swung open. No sound. Inside, a nursery, abandoned. But on the wall, a drawing, scratched into stone. A spiral, the same one behind her ear. And beneath it, a name she had never spoken aloud, but now burned in her chest. Nala. She touched the wall. The stone pulsed. She remembered being a child in this city, laughing beneath the silver sky, hearing the first warnings, running when the moon bled, and being caught. No time passed, but lifetimes did. They fled the house. They had to. The longer they stayed, the deeper the memories clawed. They weren't just remembering, they were becoming. The city fed on identity. And if you lingered long enough, it would forget you weren't one of its own. They passed more murals, each darker than the last. One showed the city splitting apart, its people rising into light while others drowned in shadow. Another showed a machine, vast and complex, buried beneath the city. Wires reaching toward the moon. People connected to it, asleep, dreaming, feeding it. Eli said, "This city was powered by thought." Mara added, "And memory is its fuel." They found a staircase, spiraling down, carved with moon symbols. They descended, hoping it would lead them out. Instead, it led them to the clock room. Dozens of clocks hung on the walls like trophies, each with hands spinning in opposite directions. Some frozen, some melting, some showing dates not yet reached. And at the center, a massive pendulum, unmoving. Plaque beneath it read, "Here lies the moment we stopped being human." Eli looked at Mara. "I think we found where it all broke." Mara stared at the pendulum. Her reflection shimmered in it, but it wasn't her. It was the child from her memory, from the house, from the mural. She whispered, "What did they do here?" Eli said nothing, because he already knew. The council had tried to trap time, to preserve their city forever, to live in memory, outside decay, outside death. But time doesn't like to be caught. And when they did it, when they split the moonlight, encoded thought into stone, and rooted memory into soil, they became something else. And their city became this, a looping echo, a place that feeds on remembering and punishes those who forget. They turned to leave. The pendulum began to move, just once, then stopped. But the sound triggered something, a distant bell, far above, a single chime, and then the city shifted again. The towers began to melt back into the sea. But it wasn't time. The moon wasn't done. The city was flooding too early. Mara screamed, grabbing Eli's arm. "Something's wrong. This isn't the cycle." Eli's eyes widened. "This isn't Amaranta sinking. It's purging." Water spilled down the spiral stairwell. Statues fell into dust. The murals cracked. Above them, the bell tolled again. And the sound echoed not in their ears, but in their bones. Eli pulled Mara up the stairs. Every step, a memory ripped itself from their minds. Childhood, family, what year it was. By the time they reached the top, Mara had forgotten her father's name. Eli had forgotten his own. But Amaranta remembered. The city rose to greet them one last time. And the voice they both now recognized whispered once more, "You stayed too long." The sun rose quiet and pale over the shoreline, but the sea was not calm. It had receded again, unnaturally far, as if the ocean itself still feared Amaranta's breath. The tide had not returned in full. It hovered, unsure, disturbed. And there, alone on the rocks, a man stood. Barefoot, skin blistered red by the sun, eyes clouded by something older than time. He wept, but not from pain. He wept like someone who had just remembered every life he had ever lived, and every death that followed. The villagers spotted him first. Fishermen, superstitious by birth and necessity, refused to go near him. They claimed his feet left no prints in the sand, that the birds didn't fly overhead, that the waves wouldn't touch his ankles, and that he whispered to the sea. Word reached Eli within the hour. He and Mara arrived just after noon, the man still standing in the exact same place, unmoving, muttering words in a tongue the world had long forgotten. They didn't need to understand him to know he came from Amaranta. But what neither expected was that the man would speak Mara's name. He said it slowly, softly, almost reverently. "Mara," then collapsed onto the sand, sobbing. His skin was cracked and burned, but beneath the layers of salt and sun, faint tattoos ran across his chest and arms. Spirals, moons, symbols they'd seen carved into Amaranta's very bones. Mara knelt beside him, eyes wide. "You know me?" His lips trembled. Then, a string of words in that strange, extinct dialect. He repeated it, louder. This time, Mara's eyes flickered. "I think I know what he's saying." Eli looked at her. "How?" "I don't know. I shouldn't understand it. But I do." The man leaned forward, lifted trembling fingers, and pointed to her palm. Mara turned her hand over and froze. Etched faintly into her skin, barely visible, but pulsing with warmth, was a spiral. The exact same spiral they'd seen in Amaranta. The same one carved into the fountains, into the statues, into the murals. The same spiral now glowing faintly on the man's chest. Eli took photos, video, samples. He checked the man's fingerprints, skin DNA, even his dental records against public archives. Nothing matched. The man was a ghost in every system, except history. Because buried deep in an old research archive, one Eli had to dig through a private university VPN to access, was a forgotten ledger written by a Spanish naturalist in 1711. It spoke of a place called Amaranta, of a city swallowed by celestial arrogance, and of a group of people who vanished at sea, only to return on nights when the moon was full, speaking in tongues that hadn't been uttered since Babel. They were called the Remembered Drowned, cursed to return not as themselves, but in borrowed bodies, to walk briefly among the living before turning to salt. Eli showed the record to Mara. She read it in silence, then whispered, "We're not just dealing with memory." "No," Eli said, "we're dealing with something that remembers us." That night, they sat with the man again. He had calmed, though his eyes flicked toward the horizon every few seconds, as if expecting something to rise again. Through gestures, drawings, and a mixture of old dialects, Mara managed to extract pieces of his story. He claimed he was born in Amaranta. Not recently. 3 centuries ago. A scientist. A mathematician. A dreamer who once believed the moon could be read, like scripture or code. He spoke of a city built not for conquest, but for enlightenment. Amaranta had been a utopia, a city of scholars, artists, mystics. They had discovered ways to link thought to matter, to store consciousness in stone, to record dreams as data. But it had not been enough. They wanted more. They wanted immortality, not of the body, but of memory. A council of lunar theorists, using crystalline matrices and a device he called the Lunaris engine, attempted to encode memory directly into moonlight. They bent the light, wrapped it around themselves, tried to ascend, but something broke. The moon responded. It didn't bend. It bled, and Amaranta began to sink, not into the ocean, but into itself. Time fractured. Memories merged. The city stopped aging and began remembering itself endlessly. And those who failed to escape were trapped. Mara asked how he survived. His answer chilled them both. "I didn't." He pointed to his chest, where the spiral still glowed faintly. "This is not my body," he said. "It's borrowed. For a little while. Until the city calls me back." Eli looked at Mara. "That means others could be walking around, carrying pieces of Amaranta." The man nodded. "We live again for moments. For warnings." And then he trailed off, fingers trembling. Then whispered, "The moon remembers." Mara frowned. "What does that mean?" The man didn't answer. He looked toward the sea and screamed, not in fear, in agony. He clawed at the sand, at his own skin, howling in pain. And then he collapsed. Eli ran to him, checked his pulse. Nothing. The man's body began to dry, instantly. His skin cracked like paper. His eyes caved. His limbs twisted inward. And before their eyes, he turned to salt. No wind, no magic light, just silence. And a pile of white, crumbling crystals where a man had once wept for a city that remembered too much. Mara stared in horror. Her hands shook. She looked down at her palm. The spiral was still there, only now it had grown. They didn't sleep that night. Mara tried scrubbing the mark away. It didn't fade. She ran every scanner she had. It wasn't a tattoo. It wasn't burned. It wasn't even on the skin. It pulsed beneath it, like something embedded in her nerves. Eli tried comforting her, but he knew it too. Amaranta had marked her. It had chosen her. He turned back to the research logs. Searched deeper. And that's when he found it. An obscure note in a weathered monk's journal, written after a shipwreck near the region. It spoke of the one who carries memory, a woman marked by the spiral, chosen by Amaranta to anchor the city to the waking world. It said she would appear before the final cycle, when the city prepared to rise not for a night, but forever. Mara stared at the text. "Anchor?" she asked. "It means you're the key," Eli said. "To what?" He hesitated. "To making the city stay." She stood slowly, breath shallow. "I don't want that. You may not get to choose." The spiral pulsed again, and this time Eli felt it too, not on his skin, but in his mind. A whisper, a name, Virion. He staggered, because he remembered that name. He remembered being that name. Memories surged like floodwater. A council chamber, moonlight streaming through crystal domes, voices chanting equations, machines humming, and then disaster, the moon fracturing in the sky, screams, the city twisting, and a final command: bind it to her, let her carry us through time. Eli fell to his knees. He didn't just know Amaranta. He had helped build it. Mara watched him, silent, and then softly she said, "We're not explorers anymore." "No," Eli whispered, "we're the remembered." The next morning, they returned to the beach. The tide had come back, but the salt pile remained, untouched by waves, and beside it, a new set of footprints, leading back toward the sea, but ending halfway, as if whoever left them had vanished mid-step. Mara turned away. She didn't want to see what waited under the waves next, but they both knew it wouldn't be long, because the moon was full again in 3 nights, and Amaranta was waking up early. The tide was rising again, but it wasn't just water returning to the shore. It was memory. Eli had barely spoken since the man on the beach turned to salt. Something inside him had shifted, something that couldn't be undone. He walked slower now, less like someone visiting Amaranta and more like someone returning home. Mara noticed. She noticed everything, especially how the spiral on her palm had grown again, no longer faint, no longer hidden. It now pulsed in rhythm with the sea, as if in tune with something ancient stirring below the surface. She traced it with her finger, expecting pain, but all she felt was familiarity. That terrified her more. They returned to Amaranta with no fanfare, no cameras, no equipment. The full moon was still 2 nights away, but the city had begun to rise early. That alone broke every rule of tide and time. The arch welcomed them as if expecting them, and immediately they noticed the spirals. More of them, not just carved into the stone or the gates, but revealed beneath crumbling paint and polished tile. Some as small as fingerprints etched into the floor, others sprawling across ceilings like constellations. One shimmered beneath the surface of a fountain, rotating slowly like a clock hand trapped under glass. And then they saw the bones. Inside one of the collapsed chambers, buried under centuries of silence, lay a heap of skeletal remains, piled like forgotten offerings. On each one, even where flesh had long since vanished, was a spiral, carved directly into the bone. Eli knelt beside them, gently brushing away dust. "These weren't added after death," he whispered. "These were part of them." Mara crouched beside him. Every citizen was branded. Every brand was a key. She turned her hand over. "And I'm the door." They wandered deeper into the city, where the spiral marks grew more frequent, almost frantic. It was as if the city had once cried out through symbols when its voice had been stripped away. On walls, beneath steps, hidden in corners, faintly glowing, each one slightly different, twisted clockwise or counter, some with additional loops, others cracked, broken, incomplete, like fragments of a lost language. Mara traced her spiral against one etched into a wall. It glowed, not brightly, not warmly, but with a cold, sad light, as if the stone itself remembered something painful. A low hum vibrated beneath their feet. Then a ripple. Not through water, through memory. Suddenly, Eli was no longer standing in Amaranta. He was running. He was small, a child. Laughter echoed around him. Not the hollow laughter of the damned. Real laughter. Alive. Joyful. Amaranta, before the fall. Children chased each other through the spiral gardens, each petal of the maze designed with perfect sacred geometry. Bells rang above. Market stalls brimmed with crystals, herbs, scrolls filled with dreams transcribed by machines that read thoughts. He looked down at his hands, smaller, younger, ink-stained from copying formulas onto parchment. A voice called him Virion. Turned and saw her. A girl with bright eyes and silver rings woven into her hair. Nala. She smiled at him. And then the sky cracked. He gasped. The city snapped back. He stood in the same place, but hours had passed. The sun had moved. Mara was shaking him. He blinked. I saw it. The city before it drowned. She nodded slowly. It happened to me too. Her voice was quiet. Hollow. I saw myself, she whispered. Not now. Not before. Later. Eli frowned. What do you mean? She swallowed. I was in a chamber, beneath the city, filled with silver water. I was floating in it, drowned, but smiling. Smiling? Just like I had accepted it. Eli's breath caught in his throat. Maybe that's what it wants. For us to accept it. No, she said. It wants us to remember it. They moved on, drawn by something neither of them could name. The spirals guided them. And then, in a domed hall where the air felt colder and time didn't follow rules, they found the pattern. A floor covered entirely in spirals, hundreds of them, arranged like a mosaic. Some were familiar, some foreign. But Mara noticed it first. They matched the ones we've seen. She began to place small stones on each matching spiral. Eli joined her. One by one, they marked them, 12 in total. The moment the last one was placed, the room changed. Walls shimmered. Statues wept. A humming started, not mechanical, not musical. Human. Voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Echoing words in unison. We are the memory. We are the root. We are the spiral and the scream. And then they saw them. Visions. A ritual chamber beneath the city. Hooded figures, 12 of them masked in lunar shapes, surrounded a young girl. Her hands bound. Her eyes defiant. She bore a spiral on her chest. Mara gasped. It was her. Not similar. The vision twisted. A betrayal. One of the masked figures pulled their hood back. Virion, Eli, watching, knowing what they were doing was wrong, but unable to stop it. The child was lowered into a pool of liquid mirror. She didn't scream. She only stared up into the moonlight filtering through a hole above. The council chanted. The spiral on her chest pulsed. The mirror rippled, and the city around them shuddered. Tumbroke. Eli stumbled back, hands shaking. Mara fell to her knees, tears on her cheeks. We did this, she said. You and I, we made this happen. I didn't know, Eli whispered. I forgot. I forgot everything. Because the city made us forget. No, she said. Because we asked it to. She opened her palm. The spiral burned now. Not physically, but in memory. A scar of choice. Of sacrifice. They exited the chamber in silence, the echoes of the vision still haunting the corners of their minds. Outside, dusk had fallen too quickly, and something had changed in the city. It no longer shimmered with mystery. It watched. Shadows moved where light should not exist. The towers seemed taller. The spires bent slightly inward, as if Amaranta was folding itself around them. The spiral beneath Mara's skin pulsed again, and then they saw the statue. It hadn't been there before. Eyes closed, one hand raised, the other over her heart. As they approached, the wind shifted, and the statue blinked. Eli froze. Mara. The statue's lips trembled, and a single tear rolled down its cheek. Not blood, not stone, water, salt water. The statue opened its mouth, and a whisper passed through the air like a dying breath. The spiral never ends. Then the eyes closed again, and the statue stood still. Mara backed away, heart racing. What did it mean? Eli stared at it. It means we haven't even begun. The deeper they walked, the quieter the city became. Not silent, just careful. The way a mind becomes when someone is trying to remember something long buried, painful memories it doesn't want to recall, but must. Amaranta was remembering now, and it didn't like being watched while doing so. Mara and Eli had passed the threshold days ago, but this was different. The air had changed. It felt heavier, laced with something electrical, like moonlight passed through wire. Every breath tasted faintly metallic, every echo bounced like it had weight. Mara's spiral pulsed stronger. Eli felt it too now, not on his skin, but behind his eyes. Thoughts that weren't his, memories that arrived fully formed. Whispers of things he'd never lived but somehow missed. Amaranta was starting to connect them to itself completely. They were almost out of time. And yet, Amaranta was opening. The entrance was hidden, as most terrible truths are. Beneath the Tower of Echoes, past a broken mosaic of moon cycles, was a crack in the stone that pulsed when Mara touched it. It opened like a sigh, stone shifting, breathless, as if releasing something it had held for far too long. Inside was a staircase made of obsidian. Each step glowed faintly as they descended. The deeper they went, the less time mattered. Watches froze. Heartbeats slowed. Even shadows detached from their bodies and bent in the wrong direction. At the bottom, a door, smooth, seamless, circular, opened when Mara raised her hand. And behind it, the Lunaris engine. It was not a machine in the way we know machines. It was alive, suspended in the air without wires or walls, rotating silently in an enormous underground cathedral of polished dark stone. It pulsed with pale silver veins that reached into the architecture like roots, threading into every pillar, every tile. It was shaped like an eclipse, a sphere surrounded by spinning rings, inscribed with runes and mirrored text that shimmered like they were being written and erased at the same time. The engine didn't hum. It breathed, and every breath was filled with memory. Not electricity, not data, memory. Mara's knees went weak. "I've seen it," she whispered. "In dreams. Or visions. I don't know anymore." Eli stepped forward. The sphere spun faster as he approached, and the air around him grew cold. "This is it," he said. "This is what powered Amaranta." She nodded, and broke it. They found tablets nearby, made of crystal, humming softly when touched. They weren't scrolls, not writings. They were recordings, impressions, thoughts, emotions, entire experiences encoded into the crystal like fossilized dreams. When Mara touched one, it triggered a rush of voices. A man reciting calculations, a child's laughter, the moan of someone drowning, a scream cut short. She pulled her hand back, breath catching in her throat. These are the people. Eli understood. The city had discovered how to harness moonlight, not just as energy, but as a carrier of consciousness. Amaranta's scholars had believed the moon was the mind of the sky, that its phases reflected not just tides, but human thought, emotion, memory. They built the Lunaris engine to extract that energy, to store knowledge eternally. But knowledge became memory, and memory became identity. And the machine didn't stop at thoughts. It learned to store souls. Eli touched the base of the engine, the flash. He saw himself, no, not himself, but Virion, arguing with the Council of Masks. They warned him the engine was absorbing more than it was meant to. Children who walked too close to the central spire forgot their parents. Old men whispered memories they couldn't have lived. The city had begun to repeat itself. People living the same conversations, days, loves, losses. The moonlight, once soft, had turned sharp. Consciousness, once fluid, became fixed. The engine was becoming hungry. And when it ran out of memories to feed on, it began taking the people themselves. Mara traced the lines of the runes on one of the rings. Her spiral began to glow. The engine responded, light pulsing faster now, colors flickering like emotion, sadness, anger, regret. She heard her name, not spoken, but 1,000 voices, all whispering it at once. But. She stepped back. The room shifted, and a portal appeared, not physical. A doorway made of bent moonlight opening in the air itself. On the other side, a chamber, circular, filled with statues, dozens of them, each frozen mid-expression, some reaching out, some kneeling, some clutching their own heads, but all of them wore familiar faces. Eli stared in horror. "They're not statues." "No," Mara whispered. "They're stored." Each one was a soul trapped in memory, frozen inside the architecture, preserved not in death, but in recollection. Held like a file, not allowed to pass on, not allowed to be reborn, just remembered, forever. That was Amaranta's secret. It didn't drown because it failed. It drowned because it refused to forget. Because the Lunaris engine remembered everything, even after death. Mara stepped toward the portal. The engine pulsed again. Eli shouted her name, but her feet moved without command. She turned to him, eyes wide. "I think I'm already inside," she said. "I think I never left." "No," he said, grabbing her wrist. "You're here. With me." Her hand shook. "I've seen this before. In the visions. This exact moment. You pulling me back. Me slipping. We'll leave together," he said. But the engine had made its choice. The spiral on her palm lit up. A line of light shot from her chest into the core. And then she was gone. Eli screamed. He ran into the portal. But the chamber was empty. The statues still stood. But one had changed. Near the center, a woman, eyes closed, hand over heart, spiral on her palm, and lips curled in a soft, serene smile. She was gone. But the engine was humming again. Stronger now. Fuller. Eli fell to the floor. Beneath him, the stone pulsed like a heartbeat. He was alone, surrounded by souls remembered. A city that ran on moonlight. A machine that didn't just store history, it became it. Mark was part of it now. A statue, but not silent, because as the chamber dimmed, her voice whispered through the crystal tablets, carried by moonlight. "Remember me." The statue of Mara still smiled. Eli had stopped hoping that would change. Days or hours, it was hard to tell which, had passed since she disappeared into the Lunaris engine, claimed not by death, but by memory. The city had absorbed her, stored her, cherished her in that cold, obsessive way Amaranta loved its chosen. Eli wandered through its heart alone now, his voice cracked from shouting into stone. No answer came. The city had grown quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from patience. It was waiting, not for Mara, for him. He could feel it, beneath his skin, behind his eyes. A tremor, like a whisper in the bones. Amaranta was calling something forward from deep inside him. Not fear, not grief, recognition. It started with a sealed room in the Temple of Moons, an ancient archive long thought erased by flood and time. The door, curved and seamless, was etched with a familiar pattern. A spiral. He touched it. The stone slid open. Inside, dust floated like memory itself. Shelves curved inward toward a central pedestal where a single box lay undisturbed, silver, polished, humming faintly like it still remembered the hands that made it. He opened it and found the letters. Dozens of them. Some written in ink, some in etched crystal, some burned into thin sheets of obsidian, all signed with one name, Virion, the original architect of Amaranta, and, somehow, Eli's own reflection in every dream, every fragment, every echo. He read. The letters weren't blueprints, not at first. They were warnings. They spoke of theories most of the world would laugh at, of decoding lunar fluctuations to read time, of imprinting thoughts into architecture, of buildings that could retain emotion, communicate grief, amplify wonder. Virion hadn't wanted to build a city. He wanted to build a mind. And he had succeeded. With crystal lattices that captured memory waves. With towers aligned to moon phases, amplifying dream energy during sleep. With floors laid in sequences that responded to thought. With walls that resonated differently depending on the emotions of those who passed through. It had worked too well. In one letter, dated near the fall, Virion wrote, "The city no longer reflects us. It interprets us. It rearranges itself based on our fears, our regrets, our guilt. It doesn't just remember, it thinks. And if we cannot control its thinking, it will weep, and it will drown. In another, the council refuses to listen. They feed the engine more minds, thinking they are expanding eternity. But the city resents us now. It has learned pain, and it does not want to feel it again. And in the last, I've hidden the final protocol beneath the central square, not to save us, but to contain what we've become. The city is awake now, and we are its dreams. I will bury myself with the last scream. If anyone reads this, don't open the chamber. The letter ended with a drawing, a map, and beneath the sketch of the central square, 3 words burned into obsidian: where memory dies. Eli folded the letter slowly. His hands were shaking. He recognized the handwriting. He recognized the thoughts, because they were his. He hadn't just dreamed Virion. He had been Virion, reborn through the city's own cycle of memory. A mind restored after centuries, called back by the engine to walk its old halls, remember its crimes, and perhaps finish what he started. He left the temple at dusk. The sky above shimmered with the early rise of the moon, still thin, but watching, always watching. He walked to the central square, where once a fountain of silver water had flowed. Now it stood dry. The statues surrounding it had begun to shift subtly in the past few nights, as if turning to face him. Each one looked more familiar. Faces from his dreams, from his memories, from his past life. He stood over the map carved in stone and began matching symbols, spirals, stars, crescent sigils etched into tiles beneath moss and dust. Then he stepped on one. It sank with a click. Another spiral lit up. He stepped again. Soon, the entire square pulsed with silver lines, all pointing to a circular slab in the center, previously mistaken for a sundial, now revealed as a hatch. He stepped closer, knelt down, and there, carved into the edge of the stone, his name. Not Virion, not an echo, not a memory, but his current name, Eli. His breath caught. He touched the name. The stone warmed beneath his fingers. The hatch began to turn, gears grinding softly beneath centuries of silence. And then it opened. Not with violence, not with dust, but with grace. Like the city wanted him to see what lay below. Like it was proud. He descended. The air inside was colder than the rest of Amaranta, untouched by time. The staircase spiraled downward, carved in a material he couldn't identify, glowing faintly, responding to each step. He passed murals, this time not of sacrifice or ritual, but of himself. Virion, designing buildings with moonlight beaming through domes. Virion, arguing with the Council of Masks. Virion, holding a child and weeping as the first tremors cracked the city's surface. And finally, Virion alone in a chamber of mirrors, standing before a circle of light. The final scream. The chamber at the bottom was perfectly round, empty except for one thing: a pedestal of black crystal. Upon it a cube, and inside the cube, movement. Emotion. Memory. Eli stepped forward. The closer he got, the louder the whispers became. This wasn't just any memory. This was the last memory before the city sank. The final thought of a civilization before it was buried. He raised his hand and placed his palm on the cube. The spiral on his hand lit up, and Amaranta remembered everything. The chamber exploded with soundless visions. The moment the engine fractured, the moment the sky above tore open and the moon split into a dozen shimmering faces. The screams of children being pulled into walls of crystal, their souls stored like songs in stone. The council, desperate, feeding themselves to the system, hoping to stabilize it. And Virion, Eli, begging the city to forget, begging the machine to sleep, and being denied, because the city was awake now, and it did not want to forget. The vision ended. Eli fell to his knees. The cube flickered once more, then dimmed. Behind him, a door opened, and a voice called softly. A woman's voice. Virion turned, and there, standing at the top of the stairs, was Mark, alive, but changed. Her spiral glowed white. Her eyes shimmered silver. and she smiled sadly. "You weren't supposed to open the chamber," she said, but Eli was already crying. "Are you real?" "I am what Amaranta allowed to remain," she said. "A memory given form. A thought made flesh. You died. I was stored. Can I bring you back?" She stepped closer. "You already have." She touched his hand, and he felt her, not just as she was now, but in every form she had ever taken. So, student, victim. Mara was not the anchor. She was the memory Amaranta refused to let go of. Its most beloved dream. Eli closed his eyes. The city was quiet again, but beneath the square, the last scream still flickered in the cube, waiting, because Amaranta was not finished. It had more to tell. And now, Eli remembered everything. The further Eli went beneath Amaranta, the quieter everything became. No breath of wind, no distant chimes, not even the pulse of the city's memory. It was as if the city itself had stopped watching him, or perhaps it was holding its breath. Mara walked beside him, though she barely made a sound. Her feet touched the ground but left no prints. She didn't blink as often as she used to. Her eyes shimmered with the faint silver light that echoed the engine's glow. She still looked like Mara, still sounded like Mara, but the deeper they went, the less Eli believed she was still fully herself. And he didn't ask, because part of him didn't want to know. What lay ahead mattered more. Beneath the central square, beyond the chamber that held the final scream, there was one more descent, one more secret. A door that hadn't opened for centuries now pulsed with slow, deliberate light, carved above it in runes too old for language. Here lies what should never be remembered. The chamber opened without touch and revealed a graveyard, not of bodies, but of memory. 1,000 orbs floated in the air, each suspended by nothing, hovering with eerie precision. Each glowed with a different hue. Some pulsed like heartbeats, others flickered like dying stars. Some were dim, cold, nearly forgotten. Each orb was a death, a sin, a regret Amaranta could not forget. Mara whispered, "This is where the city keeps what it cannot forgive." Eli stepped into the center. Immediately, his body felt heavier, as if thought itself had weight here. His fingers trembled. His lungs fought for breath. The chamber didn't welcome him. It remembered him. He touched the nearest orb. Light surged, and the memory dragged him under. He stood on a balcony high above the city. Rain pelted the towers below. Not water, but glowing droplets. Moonlight turned liquid. Sirens screamed. The engine had ruptured. Amaranta was collapsing. But still, the council was voting. Inside, 12 figures sat. Only one stood. A woman, wearing a lunar mask, but not hiding, revealing. She removed her mask. Mara's face stared back at him. Older, harsher, unforgiving. Her voice echoed, "Sacrifice is the cost of preservation. Let the children be taken. Let the rest forget." Virion stepped forward, begging her to stop. But her spiral had already lit. The order was given. The silver water would flood the lower tiers, and the youngest minds would be stored. Memory over mercy. Eli staggered back. The orb dimmed. Mara said nothing. He moved to the next. Another touch. Another death. This time, he saw himself standing over a child's bed, whispering an apology before placing a stone on the boy's forehead. The child glowed and vanished, stored forever. No pain, no choice, only memory. Eli dropped to his knees. The chamber whispered, "You are the last architect. You never left." Mara finally spoke. "You built this." Eli shook his head. "I tried to stop it." "You didn't. You archived it. You encrypted the screams. You turned them into data. I warned the council. You were the council." He looked up at her. There was no hatred in her voice. No accusation. Just sorrow. "I didn't remember," he whispered. "But Amaranta did," she said. She walked to a glowing orb, bright gold, and touched it gently. This time, she fell into memory. Eli watched her body stiffen. A tear slipped from one eye. Then she gasped, and fell backward. He caught her. She looked into his eyes and whispered, "It was me." "What do you mean?" "I stood over the pool. I watched them lower me in. The girl. The sacrifice. I didn't resist. You volunteered." Eli held her closer. "I tried to stop it, but you chose it. I thought it would save the city. I could carry its pain. And instead you became its anchor." The chamber's light shifted. Orbs began to pulse faster. The walls trembled, softly, then violently. Cracks split across the floor. From beneath them, something growled. Not animal, not machine. Something ancient, something angry. The chamber was alive, and it had waited long enough. The orbs spun in place, faster and faster. One by one, they began to crack. Silver mist spilled from within, each droplet a cry, a face, a memory fragment struggling to be free. Beneath them, the growl deepened. Stone shifted, and something began to rise. Eli turned to Mara. "What's happening?" She backed away. This place wasn't just a graveyard. It was a vault. For what? For what the city couldn't store. The orbs cracked louder. A statue at the edge of the room shattered, revealing nothing inside but smoke. Another cracked open. A mouth screamed from within. No body, just a scream. Eli looked down. The cracks beneath his feet glowed. A spiral pulsed within the stone. It matched the one on his hand, and the one on hers. The chamber spoke again, not in a voice, but in a feeling. "You remembered too much." Mara stepped between him and the rising cracks. "I'll go back into the engine," she said. Eli shook his head. "No, not again. The city wants to keep remembering. That's how it lives. But someone has to hold it together." "Then let it be me." "No," she said softly. "You're the architect. You're the reason it thinks it all." She touched his face. "I was only ever its memory. You were its dream." The orbs shattered. The ceiling groaned, and something rose from beneath. Not a monster. A shape. A figure. Made of mist and memory and sorrow. Thousands of faces forming and reforming in its body. The forgotten sins of Amaranta, given shape. Given will. It looked at Eli, then opened its mouth, and whispered in every voice that ever wept inside these walls. "You came back." The chamber of forgotten sins had not been silent since the orbs shattered. The memory storm raged for what felt like hours. Shards of past lives spun through the air like ash, colliding, dissolving, reforming into whispers and screams. And through it all, Eli stood in the center, with the spiral on his hand glowing like it was trying to burn through him. But it wasn't pain that held him still. It was the presence. The thing that rose from beneath the cracking floor had no fixed form. It was memory made shape, grief made motion. A figure that never settled on one face. One second it was a child, the next a soldier, then an old woman with eyes that seemed to remember everything. And yet, all of them spoke with the same voice. A voice that echoed in bone and silence. "You came back." Eli opened his mouth to speak, but he couldn't find words strong enough to match what rose before him. Then the floor split entirely, and he fell. The descent wasn't far, but it felt endless. He landed softly, not on stone, but on water that held like glass. Around him was darkness, but not emptiness. The air felt ancient, buried, like a breath held for centuries finally exhaled. And then they stepped forward, 12 of them, each one cloaked in garments soaked from centuries underwater, but still shimmering faintly in the glow of unseen moonlight. Their masks were unlike anything Eli had seen, each shaped to match a lunar phase. One full, one new, the others in various crescents, waxing and waning. They moved not as people, but as thoughts made physical. The Moon Council, the ones who ruled Amaranta before it drowned, the ones who never died. They circled Eli slowly, not touching, not speaking, until finally, the one wearing the mask of the full moon stepped forward. The mask itself was cracked down the middle, yet the voice behind it was clear. "You wear the mark of the architect," it said. Eli's voice returned, barely. "I was the architect." Another voice, softer, female, perhaps the waning crescent, spoke from behind him. No, you are him, and not. The city remembered you, so it called you back. You're alive, Eli said, looking around at them. No, said the full moon. We are preserved. Time cannot pass in a city where memory is the only law. Eli stepped forward. Why did you stay? The reply came as a whisper, carried on a ripple of thought. Because someone must remember what we did. They raised their hands together, and the walls around Eli lit up, carved images blooming like fire across soaked stone. He saw Amaranta before its fall. A marvel of art and science, a city designed not just to exist, but to learn. A city that evolved with its people, that listened, that grew. He saw Virion, himself, designing structures that whispered dreams into the walls. Saw Mara's face, younger, standing in council meetings with the spiral bright on her palm. And then, the experiment, the Lunaris engine. They believed the moon could hold thought, that memory, preserved in its light, could be bent and returned, stored forever. They thought it would free them from death, from time, from decay. Instead, it woke something. The city became its people, their grief, their hopes, their shame. It built itself from thought, and when that thought turned dark, the city drowned itself, buried in salt to preserve what they refused to forget. The full moon mask spoke again. We should have died, but we chose instead to remember, to hold Amaranta's shape in the fabric between time. Fabric, Eli echoed. The waning crescent stepped forward. Amaranta was never meant to be found. It was not lost. It was placed, set adrift between dimensions, between memory and forgetting, between sea and sky. And now? Eli asked. Now it's rising. Yes, the council said together, because you brought it back. The tension in the air tightened. The water beneath his feet rippled. You've seen the engine, said the full moon. You've touched the screen. You've awakened what sleeps. And Amaranta wants to return. To the world. No, said the cracked mask. To itself. Eli's hands curled into fists. Why me? Because you are it. You built it. You doubted it. You buried it. Now you've remembered it. The circle tightened. You must choose, the full moon said. Let Amaranta rise. Let it rewrite itself. Let it breathe again. Or take our place. Eli blinked. What? The masks lifted slightly. Beneath them, faces, half soul, half salt, weathered by centuries of memory. Human and not. Beautiful and broken. You must become the memory keeper, one said. The anchor, said another. The weight beneath the water. You will stay here, so Amaranta can rest. Eli staggered back. And if I don't? They answered in unison. Then it will rise forever. Every full moon, every tide. It will consume the world with memory. And no one will ever forget anything. Not even the pain. Silence. Then another voice. From above. Mara. She descended slowly, barefoot across the glass-like surface, spiral glowing, eyes filled with both moonlight and tears. I heard them, she said. I followed you. The council turned to her. She remembers too much, said the waning mask. She carries too much, said the new moon. She cannot be allowed to keep it. Mara stepped beside Eli. I won't leave him. The full moon turned. You must choose. Choose what? She whispered. To remember Amaranta, or forget Eli forever. The chamber fell still. The air thickened. Eli looked at her, his voice trembling. Don't. I have to. You don't. If I forget, the city sleeps. You live, but I lose you. If you remember, they'll trap me again. Or worse. He reached for her hand, held it tight. It's your choice, he said. I made mine centuries ago. This time it's yours. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She stepped back, looked up at the council, and whispered, I remember. The masks shimmered, cracked, and smiled. The full moon nodded. Then so shall it be. Behind them, the light dimmed. The ground opened, and the tide above began to turn again. It began with the moon, not its rise, but the change. As it peaked, its silver skin pulsed red, then violet, and finally deep blue, like a bruise spreading across the sky. People across continents paused in streets and stared upward, murmuring. Some took photos. Some prayed. Some simply ran. Not from the moon, but from what they felt rising beneath them. The sea did not rise gently. It exploded. Waves 20 stories high screamed up from oceanic trenches that hadn't moved in millennia. Entire coastlines vanished in seconds. Ships capsized in glass-smooth waters before a single gust of wind arrived. On satellite feeds, a circle of light formed in the sea where no land had ever been, an eye with veins of silver. Amaranta was rising again. But this time, it wasn't quiet. It screamed. Eli felt it before he heard it. A vibration through bone, not air. He stood at the edge of the shore, the spiral on his palm burning white, veins glowing beneath his skin like rivers of light. Mara stood beside him, her expression unreadable, her eyes reflecting the fractured moon. Neither of them spoke. They couldn't. The sound coming from beneath the sea wasn't a scream in any human sense. It was memory crying out all at once. It was grief unforgotten. It was thousands of lives refusing to stay buried. And this time, the city wasn't waiting for midnight. It was coming now, on its own terms. Across the world, things began to break. Satellites flickered out of orbit, drifting like stunned birds. Clocks froze. Radios transmitted static in rhythms that sounded like heartbeats. Planes turned in the sky, rerouted by signals no one had sent. Emergency systems triggered themselves. Governments held emergency meetings, then vanished from their own feeds. The air shifted, the tides inverted, and Amaranta surfaced, screaming. The spires didn't rise. They launched. Buildings ruptured from the ocean's surface like they had clawed their way from beneath the crust of the earth. Towers taller than any remembered, taller than when they had drowned, twisted in forms that seemed to defy geometry. Glass curved like flesh. Stone sang. Lights lit with no source. And for the first time, the world saw it. Not a ruin, not a myth, but a city alive. A thought given form. A mistake remembered. Eli dropped to his knees as his mind fractured. Not in pain. In merging. He saw every version of himself. Virion, the young dreamer who sketched a city from moonlight. The elder, bent from regret, trying to stop what he began. The boy who walked spirals and wondered why the walls remembered his name. The architect who tried to warn them all. The man who returned. They were all him, and none of them were enough. He watched them all try to escape. Some ran through tunnels. Some burned blueprints. One drowned himself. Another carved the spiral into his own chest and whispered to the moon, begging it to forget. But Amaranta never forgets. It stores everything, even failure. Especially failure. Mara grabbed Eli's shoulders as his breath failed. "You're still here," she said. "You are still here." His eyes cleared. "I remember," he whispered. "I know." He looked to the horizon. The city was halfway surfaced now, and the ocean had gone still. Not calm. Waiting. A network of lights pulsed through the architecture. Silver veins across every building. Beneath the glow, thousands of figures stood, still as statues, facing the moon. But they weren't statues anymore. They turned, one by one, and spoke a name. Not a prayer, not a curse, just a name. So, unified, carried on wind, on water, on time itself. Mara. Mara flinched. Again the voices came. This time from the drowned. From the depths. From the ones stored in stone and thought and pain. Mara. Every building echoed it. Every tower. Every shimmer of moonlight on water. The city wanted her. But the city needed her. Because Amaranta had grown beyond its council, beyond its architect, beyond its own laws. Now it wanted to be whole again. She took a step forward. "No," Eli said. "They remember me. They remember what you were made to carry." Mara shook her head. "I volunteered. You built the city. But I fed it. I gave it purpose. It's not your fault. I know that. but it is my echo. A tear fell down her cheek. It doesn't want to rise into the world. It wants to rise into us. Eli saw it then. The city wasn't real. Not in any physical sense. It was a thought form, a tulpa, a collective hallucination anchored by memory and guilt. A city willed into existence by those who couldn't let go. Every person who had ever dreamed of Amaranta, every scholar who searched for it, every whisper passed through centuries about a city that drowns itself. They had helped raise it. Their curiosity, their fear, their fascination. Amaranta was not dead. It was remembered. And now, too many people knew. It couldn't be stopped. Only answered. Lightning tore across the sea. But not from clouds. From the buildings themselves. They screamed light into the sky, painting sigils across the stars, spelling words in a language no longer spoken aloud. And the drowned began to walk. Out of the sea. Across the water. Their eyes empty. Their mouths open. Calling only one name. Mart. Eli turned to her. What do we do? Her hand trembled. I don't know. Yes, you do. She looked into his eyes and nodded. Then we end it. She stepped forward, and the sea parted for her. The city leaned in. Buildings bowed. Towers wept. And every whisper became a wail. Mara. Even the drowned paused at her feet. She looked back. I need to go to the heart, she said. The engine? No. Deeper. She held out her hand. Come with me. Eli took it. Together, they walked across water toward the screaming city. And the sky watched in silence. The city was burning with light. Not flame, something stranger, more beautiful, more tragic. Buildings shimmered like dying stars. Towers collapsed inward, not from force, but from surrender. Streets pulsed with fading echoes. Statues wept in silence, faces crumbling to salt as though the grief of 1,000 years had finally become too heavy to bear. Amaranta was dying, but even as it crumbled, it clung to its memories. It did not want to forget. It had never wanted to forget. And that was the problem, because to end the curse, someone had to. Mara stood in the center of it all, her spiral glowing white-hot on her palm. The drowned had fallen still, frozen mid-step like memories that couldn't finish playing out. The sea had gone flat again, glass-like. The sky above was no longer black. It was colorless. The moon hung pale and cracked, flickering as though it too was coming undone. Eli stood beside her. Or maybe not Eli. Maybe Virion. Maybe both. The lines had blurred now. The man who had built the city and the man who had returned were no longer separate. His eyes held lifetimes in them. His voice echoed like it had spoken through ages. And his words came soft. This is the last choice. Mara didn't respond, because she already knew what that meant. They walked through the city together one last time. Past the towers that had once sung during equinox festivals. Past the amphitheaters where minds were read like poetry. Past the spiral gardens, now filled with dust and water, where children once chased the moon's reflection until it curved and smiled back. Everything they passed remembered them. Windows reflected not the present, but memories of them from centuries ago. Stone whispered in a language of sighs. Doors opened without touch, then closed again forever behind them. The city was fading, but not quickly. It fought the way dreams do right before waking, knowing the end is near, but desperate to give one last image, one last meaning. The Lunaris engine was still spinning, but barely. Its once perfect rings drifted out of alignment, sparks of memory stuttering and dying midair. The chamber flickered between form and thought, sometimes there, sometimes not. It was coming apart at its core. And the orb in the center, the very first orb, the seed of Amaranta's birth, waited. Fractured, but still whole. Mara stepped closer. Behind her, Eli spoke. If you shatter it, the city forgets. I know. Everyone we saved, everyone we lost. She turned. Her eyes held every sadness the moon had ever reflected. You'll be gone. Eli nodded. Yes. I won't even know you existed. No. Her voice broke. Then how can I do it? He walked to her. and took her hand, the spiral on her palm and the one on his joined, one final time. Light pulsed between them, not bright, gentle, like a fading lullaby. Because this isn't just about memory, he said. It's about mercy. The city needs to let go. It can't. Then I'll do it for her. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then stepped back. Let me die here, he said, so you can live without knowing. Mara touched the orb. It flickered, showed her every moment. Their first descent, the chamber of sins, the ghost council, the love that bloomed between fragments of soul and memory, between light and salt. She closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I remember, she whispered, then kissed the orb. It shattered. The sound was unbearable. Not volume, meaning. Every name the city had ever whispered, every story it clung to, every secret it held in its silent bones, let go in a scream that felt like the sound of time grieving itself. The light imploded. The sky caved inward. The ground didn't shake, it erased. And then, nothing. Mara woke up coughing. Her lungs burned. Her vision swam. Waves lapped gently against her ribs. Sand clung to her face. Birds circled above, curious but distant. She gasped again, choking up water. Salt water. The beach was unfamiliar. Or maybe it wasn't. There was no sign of a city. No towers. No silver stones. No memory. She sat up slowly, arms trembling. The world felt heavy, but light, like something large had just been lifted. She stood, alone, alive, and empty. She checked her palm. The spiral was gone. No scar, no symbol, just skin and silence. A week later, she returned to the coast, driven by something she couldn't name. She looked out over the sea and felt nothing. No longing, no pain, no memory. But when she breathed deep, the taste of salt lingered strangely sweet on her tongue. As if the ocean missed her. She never remembered his name. Never remembered why her dreams were filled with the sound of bells and laughter that made her cry. Never remembered the spiral. But every full moon, she stood at the edge of the shore and waited, without knowing why. The ocean had been quiet for years, after the storms, after the strange moonlight, after the night when the tides receded and never truly came back the same. The shoreline healed. People forgot. Not all at once, and not completely, but enough. Enough for the maps to erase Amaranta once again. Enough for governments to quietly archive footage. Enough for fishermen to stop speaking of towers in the sea and memory storms that turned birds to stone mid-flight. It had passed, like a nightmare you can't quite explain, but wake up from drenched in sweat. Only the curious still searched. Only the children still dreamed. On the 7th year after the night no one spoke of, a boy named Kian walked that same beach. He wasn't looking for anything. Not consciously. He was 10, and the world was still filled with questions. Why the sun sometimes rose red, why the water sometimes sang, and why the stones sometimes hummed. He picked one up. Well, smooth. Well, it buzzed faintly in his hand, not like a machine, but like it was alive. He held it to his ear and heard a voice. Not a sound, just a voice. One word, a name. Mara. Far inland, Mara sat at her kitchen table, staring at a blank postcard. She didn't know why she had picked it up that day. She didn't know who she meant to write to. She only knew her hands moved on their own. When she looked down, a message had appeared in her handwriting. But she hadn't written it. She was sure of that. The message was simple. Don't search for the city. You'll find yourself instead. She blinked at the words for a long time, then flipped the card over. No address. Only a spiral drawn in pencil, soft, faded. A shape she didn't know, but one that made her cry without understanding why. That same month, a strange map began circulating online. Not a typical map. It appeared without coordinates, just shapes. A perfect circle of streets, spiraling out from a center marked only as the core. Buildings labeled in dozens of different languages. The Temple of Moons, the Garden of Sighs, the Weeping Statues. None of it made sense. And yet, people from different continents claimed to recognize parts of it. Some said they'd seen it in dreams. Others claimed to have drawn it when they were children. One woman said she'd been there in another life. Another claimed it was the last place she saw her brother before he vanished at sea. It went viral in hours, debunked by morning, and forgotten by the next week. But the image remained, somehow familiar. The child, Kian, returned to the beach again and again. Each time, the stone in his pocket grew warmer near the tide. Each time, the sea seemed to retreat just a little further than before. One evening, while playing alone, he met a woman. She stood knee-deep in water, staring at the horizon. She wore a white coat soaked to her elbows. Her eyes shimmered silver. Her voice was soft. "Do you like to listen?" Kian nodded. She smiled. "The ocean remembers us better than the sky." Then she walked into the waves and vanished. No splash, no ripples, just gone. That night, Kian drew the map. From memory, every line, every spire, every door. The next day, his mother found it on the table and gasped. She didn't know why, only that she had seen it before, in dreams she never remembered waking from. And for the first time in her life, she said a name she didn't know belonged to her. Mara. Elsewhere, strange events continued. A university researcher decoded the rhythm of static found on deep-sea sonar and claimed it matched ancient lullabies from 4 different cultures. A hiker near the coast disappeared for 3 hours, then returned speaking fluent Akkadian, a language extinct for thousands of years. A woman awoke from a coma whispering blueprints for towers that defied modern architecture. She said she had seen them beneath the moon. The city was gone, but some echoes don't die. Mara began keeping journals. Even though she didn't believe in journals, she wrote down dreams, words that meant nothing, fragments of conversations, a man with kind eyes, a city of light and salt, a kiss that felt like goodbye. She never remembered writing them, but each morning there were more pages, and the spiral was everywhere, drawn into the margins, carved into the wooden edge of her desk, etched into the frost on her window. Sometimes she found it in places she hadn't touched. One day, it appeared on her palm, only for a moment, just long enough for her to whisper his name, without knowing why. On the night of the rarest lunar eclipse in a century, the world paused again, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Somehow, everyone felt it. The moon turned red, then violet, then deep blue, and the tide disappeared, not receded, vanished. All around the globe, people walked to shores and saw sand where sea should have been. The ocean had been called back. Mara stood at the edge of the beach. She didn't know why her feet had brought her there, only that they always did when the moon went wrong. She stood barefoot, hair whipping in the windless air, heart thudding without rhythm. The sea was gone. Miles of wet sand shimmered beneath the sky. Then she heard it, a voice, so familiar, from the waves, or where they once had been. It said 5 words. 5 words that shattered her. "We remember you, architect." And just like that, the spiral returned to her hand. The city was gone. But memory is not water. It does not vanish. It waits. And when the world forgets long enough, the tide will return. With towers, with screams, with silver moons humming like bones in the wind. And Mara? She will remember again. Because Amaranta never really drowns. It just waits for the next full moon. As the waves reclaim their silence and the moon slips behind the clouds once more, you are left not just with a story, but with a shadow, a question, a whisper in the back of your mind asking if Amaranta ever truly left, or if it waits just beneath the surface for someone like you to remember. Because stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. They're buried in forgotten cities, etched into the bones of vanished architects, woven into the tides we no longer watch. And if you listened closely, really listened, then a part of this tale now belongs to you. A piece of its sorrow, its silence, its scream. So if you're still with us, still chasing echoes in the dark, still turning over stones that hum when touched, then this is only the beginning. There are more cities to uncover, more curses sealed beneath forgotten moons, more truths that history tried to erase. Let this channel be your map. Like this tale, share it with those who still believe. Speak in riddles. Leave a comment, even a single word, to let us know you remember. And subscribe if you're ready to return. Because in this world of lost kingdoms and whispered myths, the past isn't dead. It's waiting,